Many years ago, there was a man in Kentucky who had recently retired from his job at the Postal Service. He's sitting on his front porch, and here comes the mail, and he gets his first Social Security check. And he opens it up, and he looks at it, and he says, I've worked so long and so hard, and this is my reward, one check every month. He didn't get discouraged. He didn't get discouraged at all. What he did was, he took out a piece of paper and a pen, and he started writing down all his blessings in his life. And he wrote, in other words, he made out a gratitude list. And on that list was a recipe for fried chicken that he got from his mother, and he was the only one that knew this recipe. This particular recipe included 11 herbs and spices. You may have heard of it. So this man took his recipe, went down to a local restaurant and asked if he could cook chicken for him, and they said yes. So he started cooking chicken. The chicken became the most popular thing on the restaurant. This guy decided to open up his own restaurant and named it Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? Harlan Sanders didn't get discouraged. He didn't quit. He found a solution. And there were some Franciscan monks years ago that they were the first to systematically grow grapes in California. They grew these muscat grapes to make muscatel wine. Well, one year they had a horrible drought, and all the grapes withered up on the vine. They were about done. They were about to be bankrupt. They didn't know what to do. But a couple of these monks were not discouraged. They took some of these withered grapes down to the local market and sold them as Peruvian delicacies. And this was the beginning of the Sun-Made Raisin Company. These Franciscans had the potential to lose everything, but they didn't quit. They didn't give up. We've all been there before, haven't we? Some of us are maybe there right now. You're ready to give up on whatever project it is you're working on or whatever phase it is in your life. You're just exhausted. You're just done. Personally, I was a master of getting halfway through projects and then for whatever reason just deciding I was done and quit. I thought either somebody else would come along and finish it, or I just got bored and decided to pick up another project. So I always had several half-done things in my life. Perhaps it's the end of school for you, and you're just done. You've hit the light. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but you just don't want to write that last paper. You just don't. You've got one more round of tests coming, and you're like, if I make a C, I still graduate. You know? Right? Yeah, I see a few people going, yeah, I still get out of school. Or you're a school teacher, and you're thinking, just 4 more weeks with these lovely angels. They'll be here. God's creatures will be here for 4 to 6 more weeks, and that's it. You just need to find the strength to get through. Or it's a project at work. You're down to the end, and you're thinking, man, my boss won't think I'm the greatest thing, but at least he won't fire me. Or perhaps you've decided to make a big change in your life, change your career, or come up with a new hobby. But you just need that little extra push because you're tired and you don't know how to make the final change. Well, this is why I chose this reading from the book of Nehemiah today. Nehemiah is a great stories about the causes and cures for discouragement in our life. You see, many years early in the history of Israel, the walls of Jerusalem had been destroyed and people were defenseless and vulnerable for their enemies. Nehemiah was called by God to lead the people in rebuilding these walls, but it seemed like an impossible task, and the morale of the people was very, very low. They were discouraged. They could not see the light at the end of the tunnel. So our question for today is, why with all the positive things in our life, why with all the advantages that we have, do we still get discouraged? Well, first of all, I believe it's because we get fatigued. We just work ourselves until we're just so absolutely tired. Verse 10 says, the strength of laborers is giving out. When you are physically tired and worn down, it's almost impossible to be emotionally and spiritually upbeat. So what's the best thing to do when you're fatigued? Go to sleep. Take a nap. Go spend some time by yourself. You've earned it. Don't work yourself to death. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is just go to sleep and rest. I mean, isn't it amazing how much better life is and how much better you feel after a good 8 hours or 10 hours of sleep? I got 10 hours the other night. I was so proud of myself. And I felt great. Then I got up and ate a horrible breakfast and ruined the whole thing, but that's okay. Fatigue also often leads to discouragement, and it's very important that we get the right amount of rest. Fatigue and discouragement seems to show up when we're halfway through a project, something we're trying to accomplish. Verse 6 says, "So we rebuilt the wall until all of it reached half its height." They only did half of it. They built half the wall. Everyone has energy at the beginning of a new task. But halfway through, we start to wonder. And that little voice starts in our head. Are we really going to make it? And if we do, is it worth it? We reach the midpoint of our project, and we start to tell ourselves, if I stop now, I can recover my losses, and it wouldn't have been a total waste of time. Or if I just quit now, I can sail through to the end with that okay grade. Or my boss, like I said earlier, he won't be just jumping for joy, but at least I won't get fired. That's why so many people never finish what they start. They get halfway through and we get worn out and we give up. Are you worn out and discouraged with life today? Are there times in your life where you just want to quit? If so, try getting some much needed rest and sleep. The next thing that can discourage us is frustration. Verse 10 says, there is so much rubble in their way. In trying to rebuild the wall, the Israelites discovered that there was lots of debris and trash laying in their way. Broken bricks, mortar were getting in the way, and they were becoming frustrated. If you've ever cleaned up a yard, you've noticed that once you're just about finished, there's one more stick over there. And then there's one more pile of grass over there, and then it becomes obsessive, and then it's like, I'm done, I'm going inside. But you want to quit even though maybe it's halfway finished, because it just doesn't seem like, what's the point? Whether it's at home or school or work, there's rubble in our lives, and it never goes away. At work, there's always one report to do, and at school, there's always one more test to pass. We can't avoid the rubble in life. Those things that discourage us are part of our lives. So we need to be able to recognize it and know what to do with this rubble, or we will never reach our goals. So what is rubble? Rubble is anything in your life that keeps you from accomplishing whatever your goal is. You may have had a New Year's resolution, but found that rubble's getting in your way. Perhaps your New Year's resolution was to read the Bible more. But you found out, like me, that there's this wonderful thing called Netflix that keeps getting in my way. Once you recognize the rubble in your life, then you'll know what to do with it, and how to handle it. So what distracts you today? What keeps you from achieving your goals? Whatever it is, that's the personal rubble in your life, and it will aggravate you and discourage you until you do something about it. Last and not least is fear. Verse 11 says, also our enemies say, before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them, and we will kill them and put an end to their work. Their enemy was doing everything they could to see that they would not rebuild their wall. They ridiculed them, they criticized them, and they threatened them. And the Jewish people were discouraged because of their fear of being hurt or fear of even losing their lives. Verse 12 says, wherever you turn, they will attack us. Fear certainly can cause us to be discouraged. What are your fears today? Fear of failure? Fear of rejection? Fear of health problems? Fear will certainly cause feelings of discouragement in our lives if we allow it. When you're discouraged over fear in your life, it's like we can become paralyzed, not being able to know what to do next. Fear renders us unable to think clearly, and eventually we'll just give up. So in this story today, we see three things that can cause us to feel discouraged: fatigue, frustration, and fear. So what's the solution? What is our cure for discouragement? Well, first of all, like I mentioned earlier, Rest your body and your mind. Take some time by yourself. When we read the whole chapter, Nehemiah actually gives his people holidays. He gives them some time off so they can get the proper rest that they need. But what do? We seem to make excuses, don't we? That we don't actually have enough time to take for ourselves and rest. Now, there's an old saying. It says, if you can't make time to rest now, you'll have plenty of time to rest later in the hospital. The choice is ours. Psalm 127:2 says, in vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves. God did create our bodies to work, but he also created it to get the rest we need in order to we can do the work required. So rest is important. It's so important if we remember that God made it, put it on his top 10 list. Another way not to be discouraged is to pause and to recognize that your life needs to be reorganized. Verse 13 says, therefore I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. Nehemiah didn't give up on his goal. He just reorganized the people and put them in their proper places. See, when you get discouraged, it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing the wrong thing. It may be that you're doing the right thing, but you're doing it in the wrong way. It's always a good idea to pause and evaluate your progress. That way you can make the necessary adjustments so you won't get discouraged and quit. If you want to lose some weight, reorganize your eating priorities. If you're overcommitted, reorganize your time. To beat discouragement doesn't mean that you give up and quit. It simply means that we reorganize and do things differently. The best way I've found to help me reconnect and refocus with whatever I'm working on is to pause, stop what I'm doing, and go find somebody to help. Whether it's 5-10 minutes, whether it's an afternoon, whatever it is. If I can find somebody else to help, I'm helping them with their problem, and I'm not thinking about myself. And then I realize how insignificant my little frustration, my little problem was, because I'm helping somebody else accomplish whatever goal that they're working on. And helping others always makes us feel better. I think we're designed that way. And also, if you're feeling discouraged, reach out to your family member or to a church family member for help and encouragement. That's what we're here for. God knows we need each other to keep from being discouraged. We're told in the Bible to love one another, to encourage one another, to serve one another, and to pray for one another. We need the support of our families at home and in this church in order to keep from getting discouraged. If you're feeling discouraged today, reorganize, make some changes, find support from your family at home and from your family here at church. And finally, always remember to keep God in the process. When we forget to ask for God's strength and guidance, we become discouraged. We become lost, resentful, frustrated, and angry. God is our source of power, and we use that every day to empower ourselves and to guide us as we go about our daily activities. Verse 14 tells us, don't be afraid. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome. When feeling discouraged and worn out, you must reconnect and get recharged with God. When feeling discouraged, we must get connected to the source of our power. So how do you respond when you get discouraged? Do you blame yourself? Do you blame somebody else? The people who have learned to win in life have learned how to get back on the horse after being bucked off. John Wayne once said, courage is being scared to death, but saddling up anyway. Successful people see failure not as an end, but as a temporary setback. The death of Jesus on the cross was not a failure. It was simply a 3-day setback. Sometime this week, you will find yourself frustrated. It's going to happen. It happens to all of us. And then it's going to be decision time. Are you going to give in to the fatigue, the frustration, and the fear? Or will you pause, reorganize, reconnect with God, and allow God to give you the strength and encouragement you need to keep fighting until you have won? Amen.